Did it happen?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool.
I think like right when you said that.
Oh, here we are.
Yeah.
Are we doing
Cool.
like
Well,
pre-show chit chat?
yeah.
Yeah.
Oop.
Do we have people?
Pre-show chit chat. Yeah, well, we got some pre-show. I mean, I don't think we have anyone hanging out. So, and I kind of just want to jump into this because I do have a hard stop at 5:30.
Whoa. Okay. Yeah, we better get going then. Let's do it.
Yeah, we're gonna be cleaning up the neighborhood.
Oh yeah, you gonna like go pick up some stuff and like paint some things and. Piss off my dog.
Dude, what is she upset about? Man, she's yelling like climate change is not real. Get out of here, you liberals.
No, she's like, get out of here, humans! You fucked the planet up. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, there's
yeah. Why don't you go pick up that trash that you humans created in the first place?
Yeah. You just wrap my poop in plastic. Yeah. Like, that's biodegradable. What are you doing?
Yeah. Actually, hot tip. We stopped buying poop bags. And I guess the show started. We're just going to skip the intro today. That's fine.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. We stopped buying poop bags for Nugget. And instead, we are reusing whatever trash we create or like accumulate to pick up his poop. And that works for us okay because we have a little tiny dog. He's 11 pounds. He makes small little poops. So the thing that we've been using, check this out. We get poop bags delivered every week, as many as we need, in the form of those grocery store advertisements.
That they like totally. Absolutely. Yeah. The trash that you can't make the US mail service stop giving you.
Yeah.
So like for
I actually tried.
Obligated to give you it. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it must be like the grocery stores like pay. It must be like the original PPC campaign or whatever. Like
yeah, it's unstoppable. It's now just a fact of life.
Yeah. But it works for us now at this point. We found a good use for it.
That's great. Yeah, I don't think that would work very well for our 70-pound pit bull mix.
Yeah.
I think there are just some risks there I'm not willing to take, but the neighborhood that we live in provides like bags. And so, you know, if they're providing
like trash bags,
like poop bags, yeah.
Wait. Like poop bags that are designed to be poop bags or like someone got a bunch of like okay. Well, that's still
it's not like a bunch of used grocery bags. It is, but it's like they provide it, so we'll use it, but we're not going to be buying those anymore. I totally get where you're coming from.
Yeah. One thing that the park down the street, well, I guess a couple of parks in the neighborhood, they will provide plastic bags for people to clean up after their dogs, but they're all plastic. They're all like reclaimed plastic bags. So if someone buys like a loaf of bread and it comes in a plastic bag, that might end up in this little container to let people use to pick up poop.
Oh, that's cool.
Which is great.
As long as you don't get a bag with like a big hole in it.
Yeah, well, you know, you can examine the bag in the first place.
It's on you to ensure the integrity of the
bag. Yeah.
Right on.
And you know, worst case scenario, you get a little poop on your hands, just wash your hands. It's fine. It's not the end of the world.
That's true. It's just dog poop.
Yeah. Feed your dog better if you're worried about your dog's poop getting on your hands.
Ooh.
That's my hot take for the day. If you have issues with your dog's poop, you're not taking care of your dog.
So I got like a slight rant, right?
All right, rant. Let's do it.
So I got a grant rant. There was this thing posted to Twitter yesterday, and I got sucked into being a React reply guy, and it was this like there's this meme where they show like a very basic React component with like state.
And, this was Scott Tolinsky's thing.
Right. Yeah. Scott Tolinsky retweeted this and it got big. It got a lot of stuff on his and I like replied to it like, oh, well, can you like static render and render to like native apps and this and like I sent that tweet and I'm like, God, why am I such a douchebag? Like, I really am. Like, I work in React, and I think React is great. I also think Svelte is pretty cool. I think Vue is cool. Like, I'm not that guy. I don't want to be that guy. Like, it was just terrible. And so, like, I tweet this, and then, like, I see all the replies to my tweet, and I'm like, I'm just not going to continue to engage with this. Like, I got tricked, and I took the bait, and it's pretty bad. So I guess it's really a rant
you can
about,
delete
like,
tweets, right? Yeah, you're ranting on yourself.
Yeah, but that's like, I don't know. That's the coward's way out. I live with the shit that I put out in the universe. Like, what is deleting that going to really
I support deleting tweets.
Yeah. I mean, it's. I didn't say anything like horrendous.
Yeah, I support deleting tweets.
There was actually one reply to this that brought up something called Spelt Kit, which does like SSR and stuff like that out of the box. So it's like their version of like a meta framework, like a Next or a Gatsby kind of, or a Vuex, Vuenext, Vexed. Is it Vexed? I can never remember.
Next.
I can never remember.
It's not Next. It's not Vexed. It is Next.
Vexed. Vexed is way better.
Yeah. So SSR.
Right.
That's okay.
So, yeah. And you know, you got to think like somebody in that reply chain was like, you know, there's magic in all of this stuff, and like who should feel guilty about there being magic in their code? I'm like, it does seem really weird that we want to shame each other for the amount of magic in our code. Like, if you're not writing just raw JS to the DOM, like, you're just somehow less of a developer. Like, that's wild. That's an insane thing. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, and really, like, React does have a little bit of magic in it, right? Like, the JSX stuff is not browser native. It gets magicked out with Babel and Webpack and whatever. But I mean, I get it. You know, like, it's when it does too much magic, it is kind of like, I don't know what's going on, and I don't know. Like, I think the fear of magic is people that have experience with it have experience with getting bit by it, where it's like, when you start doing things that should work according to the programming language, but then for some reason around this context or in this situation where the magic is happening, it just doesn't work as expected. So
yeah, you know, like, so like the magic is a compromise where you get this ease of use, but it has these maybe subtle or secret restrictions. That leads into our topic really well, actually, I think. Because
take it away, baby.
We're talking about like sharing dependencies across projects, and this is a concern that anybody building something at scale, or you know, maybe even not at scale, but building something that involves multiple projects that consume it, or multiple projects that need to cooperate in some way, you'll run into this kind of shared dependency issue. And so there's a lot of ways to tackle it, and there's been a lot of kind of history with this. But I mean, I think the simplest and most obvious approach to this is you just have multiple dependencies, right? Like, you just live with one app has this version, the other app has that version, so be it.
Yeah. So let's back up a little bit.
Okay.
Because first of all, I didn't even see what you were talking about the previous point leading into this discussion, but, you know, all right. Let's get the show on the road. Yeah, so I think you brought up this discussion. I think a good example was something that we were discussing about before the show, which was like, if you have a library, or if you have some code, right, some module in some package in your module, whatever, in your project. You have a code, let's say it's an HTTP library that you wrote yourself. And then you find that there's a bug with it, or like a feature that you want to add with it. Well, that code might exist within your project. And if it does, great. All you have to do is update that code to do, you know, fix the bug or add the feature. And then boom, bam, you're done. The problem is, when you have an organization that has multiple projects, and let's say they all want to share that code, how do you share that code across project A and project B, right? So let's say it's a bug fix, and you fix the bug. You know, I guess naive approach is you copy it and then paste it into project B, right? At larger organizations where you have 10 projects, like that becomes a bigger issue. So that's where we're kind of leading into today. Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of places where you're going to run into this and where you have like 10 plus projects consuming some internal library, they're going to want you to use some sort of package registry, right? So they're going to want you to publish this package so that it can be consumed.
Yeah, that's one option.
Versioning, right? So like a lot of places I've worked, we'll just publish these to like public NPM. We recently started using like private GitHub packages. We also use like an internal registry as well. That's like heavily secured and guarded and vetted and all of that kind of stuff too. So like package registries kind of run the gamut where there's a lot of options there, but basically it's which location do you run the install from, and you pull it into your project and there's a version attached to that, and you can update that version to get bug fixes or updates or features or whatever.
Yeah. Kind of the approach with that. I think I've used that, but I mean, I've kind of used that before because I write utensils, like I maintain utensils, and I've used that at a couple companies. And it's like, at this point, it does so much that I want that any Vue project I'm working on, I'm just going to pull in utensils and get going from there. But then if I work on a project and find that it's missing a feature, I'll write that feature to utensils, publish a new version, deploy it to npm, and then in the project that I'm working on, pull that down. It's got the new version, therefore the new feature.
And utensils is like that really neat, invisible like UI library that just provides accessibility, right?
Yeah, it's a naked component library for people that care about bespoke styles and performance and accessibility.
It's such like a badass concept, honestly. Like I've always loved that idea.
React has a version. I think Reach UI would be like the equivalent in React land.
Oh yeah. Okay.
And actually, web components, Lion Web Components by ING, I think. No, IGN. I think they're like a very similar thing as well, kind of like styleless components.
Okay.
But we digress.
Yeah.
So the point being that, like, if you want to, like, I think that you brought this up because of some of the work that you're doing with like a design system, right? Like if you work at a company and you're maintaining a design system and that company has 5 different projects that it needs to, that it's building, it wants one shared design system, right?
Dude, chance on Reach UI. This is wild. Okay. I haven't looked at Reach UI for a while, but okay. Sorry. Go ahead.
So I was talking about you, so I'm glad that you were, I had your full undivided attention.
I'm terrible. Please.
Oh no, I know. I'm used to it. And you know what? I like you. I like you nonetheless.
I'm glad you called my lack of attention span.
So like your design system work, right? Like if you're at a company that has 5 yeah. If you're at a company that has like 5 different products and you have shoot, that's all right. But you might have your design system that you want to work with, and you want to distribute that design system to your 5 different products, right? So you can use npm, right? You can say, I'm going to publish it as like my design system on npm or GitHub packages registry, and then pull it down to those 5 different projects when you have an update. The problem with this approach is when you're working inside of one of those projects and you want to be able to change something in your design system, you need to have that code, like that code is running somewhere else. They're not part of the same project. And so it gets kind of difficult because do you even have the design system project running locally? Do you have the credentials or the authorization to make the changes and then publish it to NPM and then go to your project and pull it down? You know, like it works well in some cases, it doesn't work well in others.
Yeah, and I think like especially like some scenarios come to mind where that sort of separation and protection is really important and good. Like having that separation of concern where like a team runs into a roadblock, they need a feature within the UI system, and you know they need to just request that from their peer over in some other team. I think that separation in a bigger organization makes sense. Whereas like smaller organizations that need velocity over whatever other benefits that approach brings, might want to do something else. Yeah, we're in it. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to ask. So I don't think that's the solution that you guys are doing, and based on our conversations, let's get into like how you're kind of tackling this and how that's going.
Yeah. So something that we're currently doing is we're building a UI library, and it's going to be consumed by more or less micro front ends. And so I've been looking into solutions on how to take these disparate projects that will all consume some common dependencies, some of them internal, some of them external, and present them under kind of one domain as one project without like navigation jank and like users getting a bunch of duplicate bundles and stuff like that. Like I don't want the user experience or performance to be affected by our stack in that way. And so like it really bothered me that this isn't something that's been solved in a meaningful way as far as I'm concerned. Like some of the solutions that we'll talk about today are in their infancy, and some of them are all grown up but have a nasty reputation, which is one of the ones that I ended up going with for our team right now. But this like registry approach, I think makes a lot of sense until you get into this scenario where a user is going to cross application boundaries on the same site. So let's say I am on widgets.com and I go over to the store, and the store is a separate app from the main kind of marketing site, but they share dependencies. They both use React. They both use, the same UI library. But once I cross that application boundary as a user in my browser, I start getting duplicate code across these bundles because they're separate packages that are built separately that are unaware of each other. And so like, this is a problem. And I start looking into some of the meta frameworks like Gatsby and Next, and like, how do they solve this? Like they're doing stuff at big scale. And I'm talking to people who are building stuff at big scale. And this is not something that I think has been solved in a very meaningful way, with a few exceptions, but I don't like those solutions. So we're doing something that is just a compromise, which is really where I think most people land, just to get stuff done and get things started and to be productive and keep the business, from firing all their developers and just hiring a bunch of contractors. I don't know. So we'll get into exactly where I landed, but yeah.
Yeah, you touched on something interesting there, because I was bringing up the pain points of maintenance across like shared dependencies, or like dependencies across multiple projects and like the shared parts, right? But then you kind of touched on a little bit of the performance implications of having the same shared dependency in two different apps being essentially the same amount of bundle or like application code in two different bundles when it could just be the same code, right? Like that's like an unnecessary hit that the user needs to take on the amount of data that they're downloading.
Exactly.
And I wonder if that could be solved with something. Yeah, well, something like ES modules, right? In the browser, it's just like you could deploy your design system code as a module, and then both applications could pull that in as a module that's in the browser that's like, no longer, I don't know, one download. Like theoretically across two different apps, it could be stored within the cache. Something like that. That also depends on the domain, because caching is dependent on the domain at this point, but
yeah, this is ES build. Am I right in thinking that Snowpack does something with like ES modules? Or am I crazy?
Yeah. No, that's right.
Okay. Yeah.
I think there's still some maturing. There's still some maturing for that, but
right. And so like that's part of the problem with the ecosystem currently is like we have this great opportunity for these tools to give users an experience that's excellent, as well as maintaining an excellent developer experience. And like that, I think is what really matters. Is like, we send a lot of JS down the line. It is a problem. Like, I think there's a balance. I don't think like everything needs to be static HTML and CSS. Like I'm just not that person. I understand that argument, and I think that it makes sense in a lot of contexts, but it just isn't realistic. But I do think we need to be very cognizant of how much JS we send down the line, and writing large projects knowing that there's going to be lots of bundle overlap and duplication seems really problematic. And so there's one solution out there that I think solves this without a whole lot of duplication, but we didn't go for it just because it's not a stack that I want to work in. It's one that I have worked in and didn't necessarily want to go back to. And that's framework-specific solutions, and this is Gatsby. Gatsby has a feature known as Gatsby Themes. It does some awesome Webpack magic that Chris Biscardi wrote just a couple years ago. And so what it allows you to do is build Gatsby projects, export them to be consumed in other Gatsby projects. And so you could build all of your microsites as Gatsby projects, export them and import them as a Gatsby theme into like a kind of main orchestrating Gatsby repository, and then it would all bundle up into a single application. And like,
cool.
That's 100% the solution that I want. I want that in Next.js. I want some of the flexibility that Next provides, and there are issues that I just didn't want to deal with in Gatsby. And so I don't get that solution, but I do think that down the line, some ubiquitous method to achieve that same goal will appear. And I think it'll come out of some of what you're talking about, like some of this stuff with like Snowpack, ES modules, that sort of thing. We're going to get into a little bit about module federation, which is something that I came across that just isn't mature enough for our needs. But sadly, what we landed on is a mono repo.
Well, okay, so hold on though. So hold on. The Gatsby theme, like that's really interesting because that basically kind of solves the design system issue, right? But that's where you would put your design system, is as a sort of theme. But then how do you actually handle the dependency of that theme? Like if you have project A and project B, how are you distributing the Gatsby theme to those two projects?
They typically be published as packages in a registry somewhere. And so like if we were using them for our needs, it would be like some private GitHub package. You could also put them in a mono repo. Like there's not a restriction there on how you distribute that. The mechanism is kind of up to you. I think typically people would publish them though.
Okay, so it's still the sort of package registry thing. Okay, and that's not the solution that you guys went. So let's hear like what route did you end up going?
So I consulted with many people on this, and as soon as I told them this is what I want to do. This is, where I see the future of our org going. And I want to do this kind of like wild thing that only like one group has solved. They're like, why don't you want to use a monorepo? And my experience around monorepos has been really miserable. I think monorepos get a bad reputation for a lot of very good and valid reasons. Like, they're difficult to work in. I've worked with some that are just managed very poorly. They become massive.
Just really quick, what monorepo, just to clear it?
Oh, this is a good thing. If you don't know what a monorepo is, it's essentially where a company or a group or an organization will put all of their so not all of their projects that are somehow related will be in a single repository in like GitHub or GitLab or whatever. It'll be a single Git repository, but it has multiple projects on it. So multiple teams, and this is where you start to see the problems. Multiple teams are editing within this project and making changes and making pull requests. And so there's a lot of tooling necessary to like link one project to another, to ensure that coding standards are upheld across all of these projects, that their internal dependencies that are kind of cross-cutting are all up to date. So there's tools like Lerna, Yarn Workspaces is one that I've worked with that kind of comes to mind. But we're actually using some tooling that came out of the Angular community called NX. And so I specify that it came out of the Angular community because what it provides, which I find really interesting, which works really, really well for teams that are growing and larger, it provides a lot of structure to hang your project on. So scaffolding for where projects live, how they talk to one another, how all of the build, lint, type checking, testing, all of that kind of stuff, like where it all lives and behaves. And this is why Angular developers love Angular, is because there is the Angular way to do it. And when you want to generate a component, you run ng generate.
Yeah, Angular's been good about conventions.
Right. And it's brilliant. And like for a problem like what we were looking at, like this is a real issue. And so like in NX, you can generate a new project, and within that project, you can generate a new component. It'll build, like it builds Angular projects, but it builds React projects, it builds Node projects, it builds Next.js projects, it'll build Gatsby, like it builds Vue projects, it'll do Vexed. Beautiful. Why can I never remember it?
You get it someday.
One of these days I'll remember that it's...
What?
Yeah. Nuxt.
It's so easy. It's the same as Next, but with one letter different.
I think that's what makes it so hard, is there's no V in it. And so it's like nothing else in the Vue ecosystem that I've encountered. So this was kind of my path to get here, was like eliminating all of these, what in my mind seem like really neat solutions. They're just going to take a lot of time and effort, like the amount of work that it would take to get us to a place where that's viable and stable enough for what we're putting out. Like we just don't have the muscle for it. And that's unfortunate, because I think it's absolutely the future. But I also think it's the future that needs to be made across all the projects, right? Like across all frameworks, across all, like, and so, yeah, like ES modules that may absolutely play like a pivotal role in this. Something I ran across in looking for a solution for this is something called module federation, which Zach Johnson, who works on Webpack, kind of released this idea, and it's this like wild, and you haven't heard of this, right?
Not really.
Okay. So it's this kind of wild, like, you can have separate projects that are somehow aware of one another during their Webpack build, and they're able to uh, kind of recognize common dependencies and not duplicate bundle distribution to the client. There are some interesting things about how you have to run these projects locally for development and how you have to publish them. That's something that I didn't want to have to deal with. It also feels like a lot of lock-in to a very, very specific method of like building and sharing dependencies across projects. Like it feels very much like you are 100% buying into that method. Whereas maintaining like
So this is more for the performance aspect of shared dependencies, right? Like it's avoiding duplication across bundles, not necessarily the maintenance aspect of shared dependencies.
Exactly. So it's much more kind of to the point of my concerns versus like I think we're coming at like related problems that are just a bit different. But I also think like anytime you're dealing with a dependency that's shared across projects, like you need to consider you're not just bloating one bundle if you don't have this solved, right? Like if you don't have a way of web packing all of this down into a single project to present to your user, like you're knowingly sending them duplicate code that's not going to be used.
Yeah, you know, the interesting problem with that is, I think back in so kind of a story from back in the day of web development and how things have changed is like it used to be a common practice to pull a share. So let's say like jQuery, for example, perfect example. Almost every site was running jQuery, and it was kind of like a common practice to pull jQuery from a CDN because the thought is, well, if a user goes to site A and site A pulls like jQuery from the CDN, and then the user goes and visits site B and site B loads jQuery from the exact same CDN, so the same URL, that user will have downloaded jQuery to, from that URL. So when they go to site B, they'll already have that version running. And this is no longer the case, actually, because
Webpack
browsers. No, not because of Webpack. I mean, it is because of Webpack, but actually, browsers. It depends on the domain. So if you are on the same, I think, root domain, then you can share the same cache. But across completely different domains, that cache is no longer shared. So if you get the exact same version of jQuery on domain A, and then you go to domain B, and it tries to load the exact same version of jQuery from the exact same URL, it's still going to download, which is, I don't know, probably a security thing, but also kind of annoying because that would have been, the beautiful thing about ES modules is that like theoretically every user that needs, or every application that needs the same version of Lodash could theoretically like save people data by using ES modules.
It totally
Not the
makes
case,
sense.
though.
And so like I think that could be accomplished, and this is something that I thought about, and it's just too complex for us to solve for our little projects right now. But like setting just for our UI library as an example, right? Like setting that in Webpack as an external, and then somehow in the compiled code referencing some bundle that's published to a CDN, like that should accomplish exactly the same thing. And we're planning to publish this across the same domain no matter what. So like it doesn't break that rule within the browser. I think that's doable, but that's not something that I hear many people talk about doing for like shared dependencies, like externalizing those, bundling them separately so that they can run these microsites across their domain. They can be, they can all run their own, like one can be running on Gatsby and one can be running on this or that, and it'll all, kind of share some of the common dependencies like React.
Yeah. You could just publish it to some URL, like just download it from NPM, copy and paste the code into a file, throw it up onto a URL, and then reference it from microsite A and microsite B, and you can make it work. You don't need, you can step away from things like Webpack and module federation or whatever, and just like go a little bit old school, and that will work. And especially with ES modules, that will be more of a viable option.
I'd like to have something in place.
But anyway, it's interesting. Right? I haven't seen much about the. Yeah, of course. I haven't seen much of the module or the package or whatever dependency federation stuff. So
it's very new. It's a little.
There is something. It does remind me of So it does remind me of something that if we can move on to the next point is there's also a challenge with shared dependencies across even within the same project in some cases. So if you've ever worked with a project that is deploying Lambda functions or like serverless functions, those functions may have a shared dependency. So let's say, I don't know, function 1 needs access to the database and function 2 needs access to the database. And so you kind of create your own module that like handles accessing the database, or even if it's a Lodash sort of thing, right? Something that would be stored in package.json. So the way that serverless functions want to work is they want the fewest number of dependencies available because they need to be small, because when they're small, that's how they reduce cold starts and just run faster. And so a lot of serverless function providers require you to have an individual like package.json file for each route. And so if you have several routes as part of the same project, ideally you would want like a single package.json saying, oh, I need Lodash for these 3 routes and I need this other thing for this other one. Well, that's not how AWS or whoever wants right. it to work for you, right? Like you would need different package.json for each route you create. Anyway, that story is getting better. I think Netlify functions, like their service, I think they have a way of essentially allowing you to have a single package.json, and then at the build time on their end, they figure out which dependencies out of your big list of dependencies are needed for route A and which ones are needed for route B, and they kind of like smartly build only the smallest deployment necessary. For me, that's still like working knowledge. But there's another company called Begin.com. They maintain an open source project called Architect, which is really awesome. And they have a way of essentially removing the magic around that. So you can create your shared dependencies in a folder, and then when you kind of like hit save or something, it essentially takes your shared dependencies and injects them into the folder where each of the functions are running. So if you define a function A and function B, they both need their own sort of folder for that function to run. And then the shared dependencies kind of get pulled into that folder as its own little, serverless function with all the dependencies it needs packaged right there, nice and easy.
That's interesting.
I don't know if that was clear, but we'll link to the documentation that probably does a better job of explaining it.
That's something that I'm going to have to.
Yeah, that way you basically deploy these functions, and the shared dependencies aren't actually shared; they're like cloned and copied over.
Okay, so yeah, we're using Netlify. I plan to have any of our kind of
thoughts.
Our functions are going to be kind of independent libraries that we publish and run that way. And that way, each kind of application can access those and depend on them existing in the Netlify ecosystem instead of depending on a framework like Gatsby or Next to produce those, which will end up, I believe, in Netlify being exactly the same thing. But this allows us to kind of have our own individual kind of separated concerns for the code. Yeah, it looks like we've developed a pretty long delay here. Probably something like 20 seconds. That's unfortunate. I'm putting my hands up. Put your hands up when you hear me put my hands up.
Yeah, that's okay. We can solve that in editing. It'll be okay for the podcast. Raise your hand. You know, the funny thing about that is we actually raised hands at the same time, as far as I could tell. So now I have no idea when the delay is going to be.
Okay. So I counted that down at something like 23 seconds.
I'll see you laughing any minute now.
You see me laughing at about 23 seconds. So I think we've covered like a lot of really interesting kind of high-level concepts with this. Like the approach that you take with this really depends on what your needs are when you're building your project. And so it's super difficult.
There it is.
It's super difficult to nail down like one approach versus another. Because I think in a lot of approaches, like it doesn't necessarily matter if you're sending duplicate code, depending on your user path through your sites. I just find that to be something like I don't want to do as a developer. Like I want to avoid that as much as possible. But I know, you know, there are lots of kind of paths to good enough. And really where I hope to get to with this is not just good enough, but a solution that benefits more than just us. So Austin's back. Hello.
Yo.
Okay.
Hi.
Hey there. Well, hopefully
you still can't tell if we're on a delay or not.
I don't think we are. Raise my hand.
No, I don't think so. Yeah. Sorry about that.
9 seconds.
No way, really?
That's what I counted between me raising my hand and you raising your hand. Some of that might just be like your incredibly slow reaction time.
Yeah, just say it again.
Raise your hands. Okay, that's much better.
Well, because the problem is like you'll like raise your hands and then like 2 seconds later be like, raise your hands. And so so you're counting down from when you raise your hands, not from when or when you tell me.
I'm counting down from like right after I tell you to do it.
Oh,
but it's fine. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, okay. That's okay.
Let's wrap this up. This has been a lot of, I mean, this is like the world that I live in right now, so it's really interesting to me. But you know, I think a lot of people get to this place and it's kind of a scary spot. Like there's a lot going on in this space. It's weird.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's a problem that a lot of people are facing with, and even with some of these solutions, like they're all fine. They work, but they all have kind of their pros and cons. The one that we didn't really touch on too much or at all was Git Sub Modules, and I think both of us had some shared experience with this. Was like we've both run into this at this point in our careers, and inevitably you get to the conversation of Git Sub Modules, and it's like, oh, that sounds perfect. That sounds exactly what I need. And every conversation around it is, do not use Git Sub Modules. Avoid at all costs. And to explain what Git Sub Modules is, and it's even kind of hard to explain, but it's basically a Git repo within a Git repo, or something like that. So you can tell your Git repo that within the Git repo, it kind of depends on these other Git repositories. And so at some point, if your Git repository over there gets an update, you can tell the one that you're working on, hey, current project, please pull down the latest changes from a remote project, and it will do that. And I think the benefit to Git submodules, or in theory, the benefit to Git submodules is you should be able to make changes to one of your dependencies within your project and update the remote repo. And in theory, it works, but in practice, it doesn't. And I don't remember what the problem was when I ran into it, but it just like becomes a can of worms. And it's hard to separate the I think with all of the shared dependencies, like you have to have a very strict separation of concerns, or like you can't have like spaghetti code leaking from one project to another.
Like I can imagine, like just from that explanation, I can imagine scenarios where like I consider myself a mediocre Git person. Like I understand Git to a mediocre level. I can resolve some issues. I can, do some things. Once in a while I resort to just deleting everything and pulling everything from the main branch back down. But like I think I'm pretty mediocre at Git. I can't imagine like Git submodules where you're resolving those things both with a core repository and remotes or subs, right? Is it like a sub-dom relationship happening, or how does that work?
I don't know. There's no safe word though. I think that's the problem.
The safe word.
All right. Well,
word is
anyway,
rm-rf.
Oh gosh. Yeah. Watch out with that one. I think it's worth mentioning, like in this conversation, it's worth mentioning if you're running into this sort of issue, take a look, definitely read about what's like all the conversations around it, because I think some people have probably pulled it off and it works great. I think a lot of people have tried and it doesn't work great. So maybe it works for you. Maybe you're smart. You're probably smarter than me. Yeah. Yeah. Let's wrap up. Yeah.
Yeah. I want to do my shout out. I'm very excited to do my shout out. My shout out is tape measures. So we just got a new fridge.
Nice.
And my wife went to design school. She's an interior designer. She does like project management and stuff now, but like she knows how to measure things, right? So this isn't me being an idiot with a tape measure, not knowing what he's doing. Like we measured the shit out of the opening for the fridge. We bought a fridge. It should fit. It did not fit. And
Spoiler
so
alert.
Yeah, I do have lots of tools, including saws, and so I made that thing fit. We're renting a place right now, and so I think we're probably not going to get our deposit back. I don't know. Do you think like permanent modification to the kitchen would warrant not getting a deposit back?
Depends. What's your painting and or plaster skills?
You make a good point. I might be able to pull it off. We'll see when we put the old fridge back if I can make it look right.
Wow. Well, good luck with that. I am going to give a shout out to a book that I love called The Alchemist. It is by Paulo
How much do you really love it?
Quello.
You don't even know the author's name.
I don't know how to say the author's name, but I love the book. You want to know how much I love this book? I am rereading it for the third time in a row. Not just like third time.
So do you love it, or is your reading comprehension just like really low?
Nice.
I shouldn't talk. I'm barely
no,
literate.
it's brilliant. It's a fable about, what is it? Finding your destiny or something like that. But it was like, I read it. I don't know. I've been feeling it a lot lately, and just has some really cute, like, it's super short read, 170 pages or something like that.
Is this like Jonathan Livingston Seagull or Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance? It sounds like that kind of vibe.
No, it's a fable. So it's like a story about a boy that goes and like tries to find his destiny, and just kind of like, it doesn't necessarily prescribe any sort of tips or knowledge on how to do stuff. It's just like a nice little story that's simple, but you can kind of like, I don't know. I think it can be applied to everyone's life on like listening to what your heart wants.
My heart just wants a regular supply of electricity so that it keeps beating.
Well, anyway, that's all we got. Unless you got something else that you want to share, I think we can call it. Yeah.
Let's call it. This one's done.
Great. Perfect way to end the show. Well, Grant, I think, yeah, call it. Boom.